Okay, welcome to the Esports Research Report. I'm Brian McCauley here in Sweden in Jönköping, the city of DreamHack, where I work for the Media Management and Transformation Center.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steph Orm. I'm a professor at Emmanuel College in Boston in the United States. Our guest today is Cliff Lilja, an entrepreneur who's been involved in the Swedish esports scene as a player, coach, founding member of several competitive teams, as well as starting Sweden's biggest grassroots organization, Esports United. Welcome, Cliff. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Thank you, Steph, for inviting me, and thank you, Brian. So telling a bit about myself, when you did a wonderful presentation of me and what I have been doing. Of course, like Esports United is a part of why I'm here and why maybe people know who I am. And it's because also, like we're going to talk about a bit more in the future here, but that is one of the biggest organizations in Sweden. It helps grassroots and it helps esport to kind of move on in Sweden and kind of develop forward. And I have been, like you said, from the beginning, and this goes back maybe 15 or 20 years when I was a player.
25, Cliff.
25. You see, I even kind of forgot about how long ago it was. It doesn't feel like it was as long ago, but yeah, 25 years. You started playing like Counter-Strike when it was in alpha, and you create your team and you play with your friends, and eventually kind of evolves and you want to do something more. So I started organizations, I started being a coach. I did all these things, and eventually I started big organizations to help the grassroots and the teams in Sweden. That was how Esport United was created. So it's a wonderful story that I think we're going to get into a bit more in the questions that are coming ahead.
So, Cliff, our first question, as usual, is what is your definition of esports? How would you explain it to somebody?
Well, the short answer, I think, would be it's competitive sports in computer games. I mean, that's, I would say, the definition of it. But many people use the definition in a kind of wide range, everything from the culture behind gaming and esports. If you're going to be very clear, I think it's just a competition of it. But if you think about the culture, it could be everything from, even some people say, esports, it could be cosplay. It could be just gaming. It could be making frag movies. It's so wide and so wide range. It depends on who actually are talking about the subject. But just keep it short for now. We'll say it's competitive computer gaming. I would say is the short answer to that question.
I like your longer answer, to be honest.
Well, yeah, I think that's great. So we were saying, you've been in this esports sector for 25 years, long amount of time. How'd you get started with it, and what was it like when you started out?
Well, when I started out, I think I started out like every other boy or girl in that age. I think I was around 12, 13, something like that. You got your first computer. This was way back, before it was kind of common to have a computer in your own living room or in boy room. I mean, this was not very common. Before you had maybe a PlayStation, or you had a Nintendo 8-bits, if you go that far back. I mean, this was, or Amiga 500 was a big thing for me when I had that. And this kind of was the start of gaming. And you have this disc you put in, or this... what do you call these cassettes? You put into the
like the cartridges?
Yeah, the cartridges. Yeah, exactly.
No, cassettes.
Cassettes.
I had a Commodore 64. Yeah, Steph, it's before your time. Cassettes, tapes, actual tapes. You had to blow on it, rewind them.
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. The only game I can remember from back then was like you have Indians and you have cowboys, and they were shooting, and you had to kind of steer your Indian guy like through them or something like that. This is the first memory I had. This was way back when I was probably like 4 or 5 years old. That's the first memory of actually gaming, and I thought that was awesome. It was my father's like console. I don't know. I think it was a Commodore or something like that. Way back. So I mean, that would be the first step into gaming. When it comes into esport, it was like you play Counter-Strike. It's natural to kind of bond together with friends and create a team to kind of expand the game. I mean, the game is a multiplayer game from the start. So you have to kind of play public, or you have to play with friends and meet other players. And the important part there is, why did I start? It was the community of playing with other people and creating these friendship bonds that are, I mean, I would not say lifelong, but very, very long. Some people I know from back then are still playing today, and we know each other. We stay in the same community. And this has been like the most wonderful experience in my life. The friendships that stays for so long. And I hope maybe they will come to my funeral when I die someday in 100 million, 1,000 billion years, after cryosleep and all that, but that's the first start of it. And you play, you continue doing matches, you meet a lot of awesome people. And after that, you feel, at least I felt, I wanted to do something else. I cannot stop playing Counter-Strike as much. And I started becoming a coach. And I thinking like, yeah, I should maybe coach some people, do something, give something back, do something else. It's like in soccer, I guess. A failed soccer becomes a coach or something like that. And I was thinking like, yeah, maybe I should coach a female team. Yeah, that would be cool. So I actually did that. I found some girls who were going to start playing. And this was, now they're quite famous people in Sweden. It's one called Ipsa and one called SAS. And SAS is quite well known in the Counter-Strike scene still today. Is one of the best female players ever. And this was when they were very young. I mean, I remember SAS, she was 11, 12 years old when I started, and coached her and the other girls in this team for quite some time. And I kind of discovered the problems for them. And it was that this female scene was not organized, didn't have any tournaments, and the guys were awful to them. And I mean, for me, it was so strange that people would treat them so badly, because I thought it was awesome that they wanted to play. They want to be in our community, and we should appreciate that, and we should help them. But that was not the general mainstream idea, I guess, back then, and still today is controversial, I guess. And so then I started an organization to have a female league. And that was called Sisters United. And this was actually a worldwide female Counter-Strike league. We had a league in the United States. We had a league in Europe. We had a league in Asia. And we did weekly matches. It was all, it was a total functioning league. And I did that for a couple of years, put together a lot of people to do that. But then, life happens. You have to kind of go to school, you have to study, you have to get a job. So I took a sabbatical, I guess I would say, from esports, and kind of tried to continue my own life. I even, when I went to university, I didn't bring a computer. I said I cannot do it because I'm not going to study. I'm just going to go crazy. So I left the computer at home. And then I discovered, oh, fuck, I have to have a computer because I have to do like the essays and stuff. So what I'm going to do? So I bought the worst computer you can ever have. No graphics card. I mean, it's integrated. You cannot play on this one. And that kind of helped me survive 1 year. 1 year in universities. And I started playing again because I got a better computer. And I kind of came back and talked to the old friends I had, and like, yeah, maybe I should continue this Sisters United, creating something else. And then it was the start of Esport United. And Esport United is, sorry, Brian,
no,
you were saying.
We'll go on to Esport United. I actually want your thoughts on, you were an early pioneer in the female scene back in the day. I mean, it's 2014, 2015 when esports exploded, right? So we're talking, 15 years ago now?
Yeah.
Around that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this was like, what was the prize money? Like a carton of Coca-Cola cans, or, there was no money in it or anything. So what was the incentive for these competitions, first of all? What made people compete? Was it just pride, or?
I think you answer your own question. I think pride was part of it, of course, and kind of seeing who is the best. I mean, that's a big part of esports, the competition. And some people say females are not as competitive as men. I would say that's very wrong. I would say some females use different tools to achieve their goal that are more seductive than what guys would do. Maybe that's another show, 18 plus. But that's I mean, it, of course, it was the competition they wanted. The prize sums, I don't think that was really the goal for the teams or the players. I mean, it was, I want to know who is the best. They want to know who's the best in Europe. And they also wanted to be able to find other female teams to play in a competitive environment. And this was really hard back then. It was not organized. Of course, the females know of each other. They know each other, but sometimes it's hard to really do a competition and measure each other when you do a prac, instead of doing a pure competitional match, competitive match. And this kind of, I mean, comes to its, what do you say, comes to it when it's a competition, a tournament where we will declare who is the best in Europe, who is the best in the United States, and who is the best in Asia. So I think the competition was what made them want to play it. And to answer your other question, what actually did they win? I remember back then we had a brand that's kind of dead now, but was called QPad. So they were making headsets and mouse pads and stuff like that. They were our sponsor that we actually got, and they supported the gaming community quite well, at least in Sweden. And that was actually what you won. You won headsets and a mouse pad.
I mean, you were there from the very beginning, so you have a kind of good overview of the scene, right, in terms of this. What do you think of the female scene today? What are your thoughts on what's happening now?
Well, it's quite interesting. I'm in one way, it's less organized today. In one way, there are more competitions and more IRL kind of events and tournaments, but I'm not sure that the community is still there. The community was smaller back then, so maybe the connections between the teams were greater. It was a little bit more friendly. Now there's also a lot of competition for attention that is greater than back then. And that might be because of course, attention and image gives you sponsors money. I mean, this has grown with social networks and all of that I have around us. That was not as big 15 years ago. When you didn't care about your Twitter or your Facebook or your YouTube account or your Twitch account, these things did hardly exist back then. So in a way, it's become a little bit more superficial. It's become a lot tougher. But there are more opportunities today, of course, to kind of make a living out of your work, I would say. So that's a positive. But maybe they lost a little bit of community from back then. If that's the natural order of things when things grow, I guess so. But I think the opportunities the teams have today is fantastic for the female teams, and something that I hope we had back then, the same support. Unfortunately, we didn't. We did what we could with the tools we had at hand. So I don't know if that answered your question, Brian, but it was a wonderful time, at least for me. I have very fond memories of the esports scene back then for females especially. And I'm glad that a lot of players that were active back then are still playing today. And that's quite fantastic. In what other sport do you have players that played for 15 years and still play at the top levels still today? It's quite amazing. And I hope I will see them still playing in 10 years or 20 years. And I think that actually is possible. What could happen is that we could see maybe more of that in the future, that player kind of cross over to other games. You start with Counter-Strike, maybe go over to Overwatch, and you go over to Overwatch 2, or you start playing Dota, you start playing other games, because maybe, of course, when you get older, you get a little bit slower, since at least Counter-Strike is, you need the great reactions. I mean, I felt, even when I was 25, that I cannot play anymore on the highest levels. And here I am now. I cannot start a game. I cannot compete with the like 50-year-olds and 20-year-olds. I mean, they're too quick. So I mean, that's a natural order, I would assume.
Let's talk Sweden for a minute. Sweden and Counter-Strike. I mean, they're so intertwined. Tell us about the grassroots of Sweden in terms of CS:GO or the original Counter-Strike. What's the story there?
Well, if you go back, I mean, we in Sweden, I think we have something quite unique, and we have the NGOs. I would say is a very important part of Swedish society. From my knowledge, it's very special in Sweden compared to a lot of other countries, because we have government-supported funds that can actually support them with quite a lot of money. We're not talking about $1,000 or euros. We're talking about maybe 100,000 or millions. And this is not quite hard. It's not that difficult to get. that made that a lot of organizations started up and actually created very advanced web pages and tournaments way back, like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. This was something available for everyone to play at. I mean, if we go way back, we had Clan-Base. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or know about it. No, but this was like the tournament page for most games back then. This was 20, 25 years ago. I don't know if it's still alive. I don't think it disappeared. It must still be there. But in Sweden, we had organizations like R60.org that was government funded in some ways. And then today we have organizations like Public Lir that actually are funded the same way. And these are the places where the grassroots start playing and make a name for themselves and are discovered by the bigger teams. And we also have these companies that come in nowadays to make the tournaments that even create more visibilities for these players. But the grassroots have been quite strong. And I think these NGOs actually created the foundation for Swedish Counter-Strike and Esport to become so big here. Why did we succeed better in the beginning than Norway and Denmark and Finland, our neighboring countries that had very high levels of internet connectivity, money to buy computers, compared to, for example, like Germany or United States that did not have the same internet connectivity. Still today, sorry, Steph, your internet connections are quite horrible, but it seems like Mr. Musk have fixed that with his satellite internet. That seems to be quite good. So the NGOs helped a lot, and these are the availability for teams today to play and actually earn money outside the company organized tournaments. And today there is a problem for most grassroots players and teams. It's always like in every country. I mean, it's hard to grow because you don't have money. You have no organizations that can help you, like in soccer or in American football or in tennis. You have government-funded organizations that help you with coaches or maybe teams. You have colleges, so you have high schools that have this connected to them. This is not something that in Sweden is a natural thing to have. In the United States, we can see from all the American movies, of course, that we're bombarded with every year and throughout your life. You can see these college movies and high school movies. They're rooting for their team. In the UK, you also have that for the soccer teams or lacrosse or whatever. But in Sweden, we don't have the same tradition, or I would say in Scandinavia. Our high schools don't have their own team. Our universities don't have their own teams. I mean, this is not natural to connect to that kind of patriotism to your school. So that actually is a problem, because that's a very natural place for players to grow and have a very safe and confident foundation. So I think that's why the NGOs in Sweden, that the eSport NGOs kind of took that place and tried to make it their own. But that was a problem because there were no one who took care of the teams. They took care of the tournaments, but they didn't support the teams. So I think that's a reason why we can see today that maybe we're losing a bit in Sweden when it comes to the esports scene. We're not growing as much as other countries, especially United States and UK and some other in Asia and stuff like that have other kind of traditions. So maybe that's something that we hope to change. We have some organizations today that I know, Brian, you know of, and you have been fighting for a bit, at least for the university leagues. We have something called the High School League, or in Swedish Gymnasieligan. And that's actually supported by then another NGO called the Public Lir with Daniel Skoglund, who's kind of holding that one. And the funny thing there is that Public Lir is supported by Esport United, so they are getting the funding from us to do their thing, to create the Gymnasieliga, and maybe even we can help from Esport United to create the university leagues also, and maybe move that along. But sorry, this is a very long answer to your question, Brian. No. So I hope if I'm going on too much, you have to kind of stop me, and same you, Steph.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I hear your points. I mean, it's, talking to some of the major companies, we have Justice here in Jönköping University student team in competitive esports. But in the universities, they're actually still the only dedicated esports student association because the other universities, their esport teams fall under a larger umbrella of games and play.
Yeah.
And that's an issue. And I'm really happy Justice are here, and they're amazing, and they try their best. But I'd love to see other universities kind of step up and promote it. And, you know, I'd love to host tournaments here, university tournaments. I mean, that's the dream, to actually see Sweden keep up. It's one of those things I'm scared of.
Yeah.
That you have, Steph, you know, the investments you have in America in collegiate esports. I mean, it's astonishing, right? What's happening over there?
Well, that's what I was going to say, is it's kind of a shame. we could be doing even more. So there's been within the last 5 years, this explosion, right, of like collegiate and high school esports programs, fielding teams. And so that's really exciting. There's a ton of investment going into that. Schools are giving out scholarships. They're building arenas. Like, I mean, it's really exciting. But there's a disconnect between what's happening at the collegiate level and the pro scene, unlike what we have in traditional sport, right? Which Cliff, you were bringing up. It's weird that we have this sort of like esports model that looks very similar to what we have in traditional sport. You know, our football players get recruited for the professional leagues from college, but we don't have that happening yet with collegiate competitors, which is really interesting. Like, pro players come from, you know, just kind of anywhere. Like they're I don't say random, but, you know, people who independently sign up for tournaments and get put on contracts, but we don't really have like an effective pipeline, so to speak. And so that's something that a lot of collegiate educators and collegiate esports coaches here are really trying to push. Like, let's take advantage of these resources, you know, that is really skilled college competitors, and boost our sometimes kind of dismal North American pro team performance. So it's interesting, right, to hear about like where you think, you know, Sweden might be kind of flagging, and what could be an easy strength for us. I feel like we need to work a little bit harder to capitalize on.
But I think that's interesting, and that you're kind of, like I said, that the problems we have in Sweden, we also don't have, since you have this kind of support even from, I mean, before high school, junior high and all that, I mean, we don't have anything like that. And that is a problem, because if you're going to build up teams, you have to have some foundation and some support. I mean, the money is not there, not even in the United States. You have to have the parents to activate in the games. And that's another problem. I mean, of course, worldwide, that the parents today don't know what esport is or how this game works. And that's even more difficult than traditional sport, because soccer have been the same for a very long time, tennis and all of that. I mean, that's generations that know how to play the game. But if there's a new computer game coming out every year and the parents going to keep updated with that, I could help my future son in Counter-Strike or whatever game, but I cannot help them with the future games that I have no idea of, that doesn't exist yet. I could maybe understand the basics, and I'm one of the few, I guess, in our generation. I'm assuming that we're kind of the same age here.
But she's younger. We're the same age.
We're the old guys.
She doesn't know what a Commodore 64 is, for God's sake.
I know what it is. I just
You never saw one in real life.
I haven't seen one in real life.
No, you went to a museum and you saw it, the computer museum, and you saw the Amiga and the Commodore.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm trying to hide my old face behind my beard. That's why I have a beard, so I look young. No, that's not right.
So look, in 25 years of being involved at the very grassroots level of Sweden, you know, we had that initial sort of advantage from a very good government scheme that put broadband internet, offered tax back for installing PCs in homes. So what have you sort of seen happen to that early mover advantage that happened with grassroots esports in Sweden? What's happened there?
Well, actually, I think not that much have happened really since. It's not, the government have not really put a focus on anything. I mean, some politicians talk a lot about it, but it's very few, and they actually have no ideas what to do. And if you go into the smaller cities and municipals around Sweden, the knowledge is quite low. They tell us we want to do something, but they don't know what they should do. They don't know how to do it. So they ask us, so what should we do? And then it might take 2, 3, or 5 years before they say, yeah, maybe we have some funding for that. We could do that. But I mean, the guys that work with us, I mean, 5 years, then they're gone. They gotten a job and work with something else. I mean, the the process is too long. I mean, this is nothing special for just Sweden. This is like all over the world. I mean, governments also move very slowly. There are some possibilities we have when esports get into like the regular traditional sports organizations. Will esports go into the Olympics? Yeah, we have talked about the Seoul, and it's going to be a part of it. And we're talking about the esport organization in each country will go into the Olympic Committee and stuff like that, and will be recognized by each country's sports organizations. And this is happening in some countries, and in some countries it is not happening. And of course, you understand that in Sweden we have, of course, this problem. We have actually two organizations that are fighting to get into the National Sport Association, that kind of give out the visas to go to different countries as a sportsman or sportswoman, and support them financially and stuff like that. They're fighting for this.